A young man stepped onto the stage, alone. Outside, hundreds of people were trying to break in through the windows. Glass was shattering. Police in riot gear were running everywhere. But he just smiled. "Let's get started," he said. No one could have predicted how that night would end. This was Charlie Kirk, 31 years old. One of the youngest and most controversial faces of the conservative movement. But he wasn't always this way. Charlie Kirk grew up as an ordinary kid in the Chicago suburbs. His family were middle-class Republicans. His father was an architect, his mother a therapist. A normal life, a normal future. But at 18, Charlie Kirk made a decision. He dropped out of college, founded an organization, the name Turning Point USA. The goal was simple: win over America's youth to conservative values. And 13 years later, that small organization had become a movement reaching millions. Over 800 campus chapters, millions of followers, one of Donald Trump's closest allies, the man who, with Turning Point USA founded at 18, was shaking up campuses nationwide, a figure that millions of young people either heroically defended or hated. But Charlie Kirk was used to this. Every time he went to a campus, the same thing happened: protests, shouting, rage. Some called him brave, others called him a provocateur. Some saw him as a defender of free speech, others as someone spreading hate speech. But he only said one thing: "I want to speak." And that night, on March 14th, 2023, at UC Davis University, everything was about to spiral out of control. The news had spread weeks in advance. Charlie Kirk is coming. Unrest began on the UC Davis campus. Students were expressing their anger on social media. University administration was holding emergency meetings. Everyone knew something was going to happen. Chancellor Gary May found himself in a difficult position. On one hand, he had to understand students' concerns. On the other, he had to protect free speech. On March 13th, the day before the event, Gary May issued a statement. UC Davis stands with our transgender and non-binary students in opposition to this hateful and divisive messaging. LGBTQ+ students on campus felt relieved. The chancellor is protecting us, they said. But Gary May's statement had a second part. However, free speech is a constitutional right, and UC Davis defends this right. And then he made a surprising admission. "I looked for every legal loophole to prevent Charlie Kirk from speaking, but I couldn't find one." This statement angered both sides. Conservatives: "So you were trying to silence him." Leftists: "So you didn't try hard enough." Charlie Kirk laughed when he heard this statement. He released a video. Point by point, he refuted Gary May's claims. "They say they tried every way to stop me," he said in a calm voice, "but I'll be there. I'll be peaceful. Turning Point always has been." He looked at the camera and added, "See you soon, UC Davis." Meanwhile, something else was happening. The Sacramento Bee newspaper published an article in the early morning hours. The headline read, "Charlie Kirk is a fascist and advocates for lynching trans people." The article caused a wave of anger on campus, but hours later, the newspaper corrected the article. The word fascist was removed. The lynching claim was retracted. The Sacramento Bee deleted its Twitter post and apologized, but the damage was already done. Students were filled with rage, protests were being planned, and no one could have guessed that no one was planning to be peaceful. Remember Luke Schalz? At the time, he was vice president of the Turning Point chapter at UC Davis. Luke had started planning Charlie Kirk's visit to UC Davis months in advance. "We prepared for months," he would say years later. "Weekly meetings, campus police, private security firms, local authorities. We planned every detail because UC Davis was a dangerous place based on previous experiences." In 2019, a Turning Point member at Berkeley was punched in the face. His eye was bruised. In 2022, an activist in Texas was beaten with a bike lock, and Charlie Kirk himself, he was constantly receiving threats, death threats, threats of violence, threats against his family. A security team went everywhere with him. Even his wife, Erica, was worried about this situation. He'll have to live under protection for the rest of his life, said one of his advisors. That's why nothing was left to chance at UC Davis. Metal detectors were set up, backpacks were banned, only 1,000 people would be admitted, no more. Security personnel were stationed at every corner. Police riot units were on standby. The event would be held at the U Center, the safest building on campus, inside, in an enclosed space. Luke Schals had said at the final meeting, "Everything is ready. But remember this, no matter what happens outside, we'll stay calm inside." But the real question was, what would those outside do? And the answer would come in a few hours. It was approaching 6 p.m. The front of the U Center was packed, hundreds of protesters, maybe thousands. No one could count exactly. Banners waved in the air. Trans rights or human rights. No hate speech on our campus. Whose campus? Our campus. Chants were being shouted. Drums were being played. The energy was high. But these weren't ordinary protesters. Some were dressed in black. Their faces were masked. They carried Antifa flags. In one corner stood members of the Proud Boys, red, white, and blue clothing, American flags. They too were ready to fight. The two groups stared at each other. The tension was palpable. One spark was all it would take. Inside, Charlie Kirk was waiting to take the stage. An assistant approached him. "The situation outside is bad," he said. "Maybe we should postpone?" Charlie shook his head. "No, I came here to speak." "Are you nervous?" someone else asked. Charlie shrugged. "Same as always." But at that moment, outside, something had changed. The protesters had started moving toward the U Center. Police tried to intervene, but the crowd was too large. "Back up!" shouted an officer. But no one listened. And then, the first window broke. When the first window broke, everyone froze. Crash! The sound echoed across every corner of the campus. The protesters were advancing toward the U Center doors. Some were spraying pepper spray. Others were overturning tables, destroying equipment. Turning Point's booths were knocked over. Cameras were smashed. Posters were torn apart. Police officers in riot gear intervened. "Disperse! Disperse immediately!" But at that moment, crash, crash, crash! 3 more window panels shattered. People were screaming. There was chaos. Everyone was clashing with each other. Proud Boys members rushed toward the Antifa group. Punches were thrown. Fighting broke out. A police officer was attacked from behind. Someone jumped on him. He fell to the ground. He was injured. "Officer down! We need backup!" shouted a voice over the radio. 2 protesters were spray-painting graffiti on a campus building. "Fascism stops here." Police caught them, handcuffed them, arrested them. But the chaos wasn't stopping. The protesters were now trying to force the building's doors. They wanted to knock over the metal detectors. Security guards closed the door, locked it. Panic began inside. "What's happening?" asked a student. "There are protesters outside, but you're safe," said a security guard. Elon Musk would share a video on Twitter hours later. The caption, "Not a peaceful protest at all." The video would be viewed millions of times, but inside, Charlie Kirk was still on stage, and he was preparing to speak. The crowd inside was silent. 1,000 people, all of them hearing the same sounds. Windows breaking, shouting, police running. Some were scared, some were angry, some were just shocked. "Is the event canceled?" someone asked. "No," said Luke Schals. "We're continuing." And then Charlie Kirk took the stage. The crowd stood up, applauded. Some shouted, "USA, USA!" Charlie took the microphone. He paused for a moment, listened to the sounds outside. Then he began to speak. "I hear it," he said calmly. "I hear what's happening outside." The crowd looked at him. There was silence. Charlie continued, "I know that people are shouting outside. Windows are breaking. There's violence." He paused, took a breath. "But we're here, and we're going to speak." The crowd began to applaud. Charlie raised his hand. The applause stopped. Because this is a free country, and in a free country, the exchange of ideas cannot be suppressed by violence. The crowd applauded again, this time louder. Charlie smiled. "Being here today takes courage. Your courage, the Turning Point team's courage, and law enforcement's courage." He paused and added, "But our courage is stronger than violence." The crowd gave a standing ovation. Some were crying, some were laughing. Some were just watching in amazement. Outside, there was war. But inside, a young man was simply speaking. And he continued speaking for 2 hours. About free markets, about the Constitution, about the future of young conservatives. He never stopped. He never hesitated. Because Charlie Kirk knew one thing. If he didn't speak that night, violence would have won. When the event ended, everyone was exhausted. As Charlie Kirk left the stage, security guards surrounded him. He was taken out the back door, put into an armored vehicle. Outside, there were still protesters, but police had dispersed them. 2 arrests, 1 injured officer, 10 broken window panels, destroyed equipment, property damage, thousands of dollars, emotional damage, immeasurable. But the event had been completed. As Charlie Kirk sat in the car, he pulled out his phone. He wrote a message on Twitter. "Thank you to our team at UC Davis and to law enforcement." The event went on. Our voices were not silenced. Free speech won. The tweet went viral instantly. Conservatives hailed him as a hero. Leftists accused him of being a provocateur, but everyone was asking the same question. Why? Why so much anger? Why so much violence? Just for a speech. Gary May issued another statement the next day. "I unequivocally condemn the violence that occurred on our campus last night. There is zero tolerance for violence," but some didn't believe him. "You tried every way but couldn't stop him, right?" a student asked in an interview with the newspaper. UC Davis implemented stricter security measures in the following weeks. New rules were established for future events, but the damage was already done. After that night, the country was divided. Some heroically defended Charlie Kirk. Free speech, they said. He was just speaking. Others blamed him. Hate speech, they said. He was deliberately provoking. The Federalist Society would write an article in Charlie's memory. Charlie Kirk was an exemplar of principled debate and civil discourse. But the Nation magazine would write something different. Charlie Kirk was a figure who normalized hate speech on campuses. But the truth was this. Charlie Kirk just wanted to speak that night, and those outside wanted to silence him. Chancellor Gary May would later say in an interview, "I tried every legal avenue. I researched everything to stop him, but I couldn't find one, because the First Amendment protected him." And right here, the big question America faced emerged. What is free speech? What is hate speech, courage, or provocation? Everyone saw something different. Conservatives saw a hero, someone who continued to speak despite violence. Liberals saw a provocateur, someone deliberately angering people. But one thing was clear. Speaking in America was now more dangerous than ever. After the UC Davis incident, Charlie Kirk's security measures increased even more. At least 10 security guards at every event, metal detectors everywhere. Threats were being tracked by the FBI. "Well, he'll live like this for the rest of his life," said one of his advisors. When Charlie Kirk heard this, he shrugged. "If I have to risk my life to speak, it's worth the risk." But no one knew that. This risk would one day become reality. 2 years after that night, Charlie Kirk would be at another campus, Utah Valley University, September 10th, 2025. It was the first stop of a tour they called the American Comeback Tour. 15 campuses, 15 speeches, thousands of young people. Charlie was excited. "This season is going to be great," he had said. Utah Valley University was planning an outdoor event. A beautiful September day, a wide-open area, hundreds of students. There was security, but not as tight, because Utah was safer than California, or so they thought. Charlie took the stage, picked up his microphone, looked at the crowd. "Hello, Utah," he said. The crowd applauded. Charlie began to speak. As always, free speech, the Constitution, young conservatives. A student asked a question about gun violence. Charlie was answering. But he would do the same thing, speak. But this time, windows wouldn't break, protesters wouldn't shout. Instead, a single sound would be heard. A gunshot. From 142 yards away, from a rooftop, a single bullet. It hit his neck. Charlie fell to the ground. The microphone slipped from his hand. People screamed. Chaos began. But this time, the chaos wasn't outside. It was everywhere, and Charlie Kirk would never speak again. When the windows broke at UC Davis, he remained standing. When the bullet came in Utah, he could no longer stand. This story began with a protest at UC Davis, but where it ended was somewhere no one could have imagined. What is free speech? What is hate speech? And who decides between the two? Charlie Kirk asked this question, and some loved him, some hated him, but no one could silence him. Until that day. March 14th, 2023. UC Davis, broken windows, but he spoke. September 10th, 2025, Utah, a gunshot, and he fell silent. 2 events, 2 campuses, 2 different outcomes. But the same question: what is the cost of free speech in America? Charlie Kirk paid that cost, first with his courage, then with his life. And now, you must answer this question.